Welcome to Family Matters with author Rita Lidstrom. 4 things invariably mark the generation of great big families: want, hard work, self-discipline, and Christian faith. Though the same social complexities of pain, confusion, and shame touched their lives, there was produced by these big families a very peculiar kind of strong individuals rarely found in today's generation. Join us in this fascinating journey into the discovery of whatever happened to the family, where God invites us to come and reason with Him because we can be made whole. Here's Rita.
I'm going to talk about my mother this morning. And as I think of her, as one question comes to my heart: how can I describe her? How can I make you love her as I do? When I think of my mother, there seems too little time in her life that was free of sorrow. Mother's name was Trina. Trina means 3 in 1. It's Trinity, meaning pure. And I'll have to say, my mother did exhibit that. The world might call it naive, and among natural-minded men, to be savvy is to be clever, to be aware of all the pitfalls as well as advantages for yourself. Well, the pure in heart don't thoroughly wrestle with those things. And because that's a higher law of being pure in heart, God watches out for them. We chose as a scripture to describe my mother Psalm 68, 1 through 6. And the theme is, God sets the solitary in families. Here's the scripture. God, you have beset me behind and before. You have laid your hand upon me, and such knowledge is too high for me. I cannot attain unto it. Whither shall I go from thy spirit? Or whither shall I flee from thy presence? If I ascend up to heaven, you're there. If I make my bed in hell, behold, thou art there. If I take the wings of the morning and dwell in the uttermost parts of the sea, even there shall thy hand lead me, and thy right hand shall hold me. If I say, surely the darkness shall cover me, even the night shall be light about me. Yes, the darkness hideth not from thee, O God, but the night shineth as the day. The darkness and the light are both alike to thee, for you have possessed my reins. That means our conscious conviction and knowing. Thou hast covered me, even in my mother's womb. Psalm 139, 1 through 13 also is a scripture that we should read. I will let you look that up. I've chosen a poem that speaks very sweetly to me of my mother. And she introduced it to me. It was given to her in the 4th grade with all the classroom to memorize. And it was called The House with Nobody in It. It intrigued my mother so deeply that when I was a teenager, on rare occasions when she felt pretty lively and in a little philosophic, playful mood, and our work was done, she'd stand up and straighten a wrinkled dress, and she would recite this poem for us, The House with Nobody in It. And here's what it says, if I may read it to you. Whenever I go to Suffern along the Erie track, I go by a poor old farmhouse with its shingles broken and black. I suppose I've passed it 100 times, but I always stop for a minute and I look at the house, the tragic house the house with nobody in it. I never have seen a haunted house, but I hear there are such things, that they hold the talk of spirits, their mirth and sorrowings. I know this house isn't haunted, and I wish it were, I do, for it wouldn't be so lonely if it had a ghost or two. This house on the road to Suffern needs a dozen panes of glass, and somebody ought to weed the walk and take a sigh to the grass. It needs new paint and shingles, and the vines should be trimmed and tied. But what it needs the most of all is somebody to live inside. If I had a lot of money and all my bills were paid, I'd put a gang of men to work with brush and saw and spade. I'd buy that place and fix it up the way it used to be, and I'd find some people who wanted a home, and I'd give it to them free. That was truly my mother. Now, a house standing empty with staring window and door looks idle perhaps and foolish, like a hat on its block in the store. But there's nothing mournful about it. It cannot be sad or lone for the lack of something in it that it has never known. But a house that has done what a house should do, a house that has sheltered life, that has put its loving arms around a man and his wife, a house that has echoed a baby's laugh and held up his stumbling feet, is the saddest sight when it's left alone that ever your eyes could meet. So, whenever I go to Suffern along the Erie track, I go by the empty house, and I never go without stopping and looking back. Yet it hurts me to look at the crumbling roof and the shutters falling apart, for I cannot help but think that the poor old house is a house with a broken heart. Well, that's my dear mother, and though she has long since moved to heaven, I will never forget her love, whose one single goal was to make a happy childhood home for us. My mother's fourth grade class, she was in Dayton, Ohio. The year was 1929. That's when she encountered this captivating poem. Yes, it's the clearest portrayal of her true heart from childhood. I think that's the best way to introduce her to you. And the persuasion of my mother's heart as a young child became the driving force of her life, even at 98 years of age, when she was in the nursing home suffering greatly. I endeavored to encourage her with the soon hope of going to heaven and suffering no more. "Oh, don't you want to go see Jesus, Mother?" I asked, trying to cheer her. "Why, no," she chided in near disbelief of me. "I'm not ready for that. All my children are here." Wow. That day I understood the difference between a woman who bears children and a God-created mother's heart. Mother's heart was naturally hopeful and buoyant, always rising to the top and going forward again and again. Father once told her, "Trina, you are the very best when pressures come." You know, that was true, and it was first revealed in her young life through circumstances that no child should ever have to experience. I'm going to tell you something about her childhood. At 4 years old, my mother remembers playing in the yard of Mrs. Amy's home, where she was cared for while her father went to work. But on a certain day, unexpectedly, her papa, Antonio, showed up from work early, and he stood unlatching the gate. Trina ran excitedly to meet him. But instead of being swept into her papa's arms as usual, he walked decisively past her with one command only: she must stay outside. Well, Trina was not used to this treatment. She was spoiled, her papa's only child. So she followed on, ascending the 3 big steps to the house behind him, and pushing the living room door open, just in time to see a horrible sight. Her papa grabbed an iron poker from beside the fireplace. Then he disappeared into the bedroom down the hall, and almost immediately sounds of a great turbulence arose that sent young Trina running from the house in fear, back out to the sunny front yard. The next thing she knew, Papa's arms swept her up and out to the sidewalk, and away they went. She remembers Mrs. Amy soon came crying from the house and running after them. Mrs. Amy took hold of Trina's little leg and pled that the child be left with her. But Antonio never flinched in his decision. He clung tenaciously to his young daughter. Soon Mrs. Amy wearied and turned back from following them. She went back weeping sorely to the house. Mother said she and her father walked on and on and on, and she remembers that soon afterwards they stopped and purchased 2 small black suitcases. And Papa bought a couple of changes of clothing for each of them, put it in the suitcases, and journeyed on. He finally set her down and gave her her own little black suitcase to carry, until tearfully she begged to be carried again. As my mother thought back on the days of her youth and her father and the circumstances of their life, she said surely her father must have been concerned about where he would sleep that night with his child. The skies began to darken as they walked on. Soon, Trina was led down a grassy bank and under the dark covering of a large and busy bridge. Then back, and further back, Antonio shuffled, clearing with his foot the rocks and the weeds and bottles. He was looking for a safe spot, and he smoothed it out with his hand, right down to the bare dirt, where he could sit and cradle Trina in the warmth of his body till she fell asleep. Young as my mother was, she said guilt and fear filled her heart. She felt very sad. She said to me, "I knew we were in trouble, Rita, young as I was." She said, "I knew we were in trouble because we were hiding." And as long as my young mother could remember that night, she said the sirens wailed in the cooling air that swept around them Back and forth across the bridge, police cars sped. Oh, they were looking for her. They were looking for them. She knew it. She would never forget that numbing, fear-filled night. In the morning, this little 4-year-old remembered that somehow her father had contacted his friend Fernando, and soon the three of them traveled to a very small house built on the edge of cactus-covered land. Mother told me she presumes all this happened in Mexico. Her father was Mexican, so that meant she was too. And she said she remembered that the day they left, everyone that they spoke with spoke only Spanish. It must have been her father's parents that they visited in this little house on the edge of town in a cactus-covered ground. Soon after they arrived, little Trina was given a little red metal bucket with a knife, and she was sent out into the open to fill the bucket with cactus for dinner. No doubt that would give her father opportunity to speak to his parents the true events of the day and his plans to leave Mexico. And he was to travel as far north as Ohio, possibly never to see his parents again. After supper, my mother remembers that the old woman held Trina close to her bosom and rocked her on the front porch in a rocking chair till she fell asleep. My mother said it was the most memorable, solacing feeling one could ever imagine. She never forgot it, and later wondered in her heart and mind if that would have been the sweetness of having a mother of her own. And no matter how often my young mother questioned her papa about family, brothers or sisters or a mother, no matter how often she brought that up, he would say, "You are all I have in this world, Trina. I told you your mother died giving birth to you. You have no other brothers or sisters, and that's all there is to it." So, evidently, Antonio walked from a hospital one day somewhere in Mexico with a newborn baby girl bundled in his arms. And that was Trina. The last time Trina dared ask her father again, she was struck across the mouth and forbidden to ever bring the subject up again. And that's when Trina began to dream of a great big family all her own someday. For a young child of 4, the travels north must have seemed an eternity, especially with Fernando keeping a very scrutinous eye upon Trina because they rode in his brand new car. For the men, the trip was urgent and fearful. Antonio, her father, was now a fugitive on the run, and Fernando, assisting his escape, was now accomplice to whatever that crime of passion was. Antonio's secret would stop with himself and his friend, Fernando. Well, by September of that year, Trina and her father had settled into a rental of their own. It was across the street from one of Dayton, Ohio's large Catholic churches. Antonia desired Trina's education above everything else, including her training in the Catholic faith. Young as she was, Trina was untainted and believed all that was taught her, as children do. Oh, she believed in the holy building, the holy man, the chimes, the chants, the swinging, smoking lanterns, and crisscrossing one's heart. Until one day, the sting of the dry, burning wine that she took, sent her darting out the chapel, holding on to her mouth, her black eyes darting wildly. A little brown hand never left her lips till she burst into the fresh outdoors. Then she bowed herself and spit for all she was worth. What a dramatic little actress her Latin blood had made of her. It was not many weeks later when the sisters of the convent approached Antonio and asked if he would offer Trina to the nunnery. To them it seemed a much better life than traveling around with this single-parent laborer working wherever he could across the country. "Oh, absolutely not," Antonio said. "She's all I have in this world," and the subject was closed again. Well, if a birth certificate was ever owned for Trina, no doubt it was lost in the transient lifestyle they lived. Therefore, she had no legal proof of age. And by the time she was to go to first grade in school, it was accepted because she appeared to be the same size as another child of 5 years old. When Trina went to school, a whole new world opened to her. She thrived on it and waited anxiously for each new day. She was given one-on-one tutoring because of the language barrier, and it allowed her to catch up quickly and to maintain her learning with her own age group. And to make things brighter for Trina, she was the only child in school with solid gold earrings and olive skin. Papa insisted that her black hair be cut just above the tip of the ear, that her earrings could show and should never be taken off. By the 8th grade, Trina was looking mature for her age and wanting only what the older girls wore. In this innocent way, Papa obliged to please his daughter. By the time she was in the 10th grade, Trina was on the campus of Emerson High School and moving about the same halls with the senior track star she had come to admire, Woodrow Parker. The day had come and it was time to meet him face to face. She spied him at the drinking fountain one day, and she stopped and turned to that scene. She leaped in front of him and playfully turned the faucet on first, and sipping from its waters first, turned and gave him a smile. The athlete drew back and allowed the spunky girl to drink. Trina finished and said to him then, "I was just wondering if you thought you could find some small place in your heart for me." Wow. My mother was bolder than I was growing up. Nothing more was said, and she slipped away. But Trina's life would be forever changed, and so would the life of Woodrow Parker. So soon she had captured all his attention. She waited for him in the halls, and he willingly carried her books and opened every door. Once he coaxed Trina to slip inside an empty classroom for a quick kiss. But she shamed his boldness and politely excused herself, saying she was not that kind of girl. All the more he left her. "I'll walk you home tonight from school," Woodrow said. "Oh, no, never," Trina protested. "Papa would never allow such a thing." On second thought, Trina reminded Woody that she was starring in the Friday night school play, and perhaps he could walk her partway home after the play. With that said, the plan was made, and Trina sighed with delight. Her opening role would send her twirling across the stage in a skirt and blouse of wild, festive colors, while she strummed on a guitar and sang in her Spanish language. She would end this dramatic entrance by gracefully landing on a mound of broken bales of hay. Sing and play? Yes, she told them she could do both easily. The role was given to Trina, and the exciting night would soon be here. The whole student body would be present. The faculty would be present. The parents and neighbors were invited as well. Most of all, Woodrow planned to be front and center in the audience to watch her. Emerson was buzzing that day with excitement for this special event, and that's when Trina's life became a whirlwind of romance and love. At Christmas break, Antonio got to meet Woodrow and wholly approved of them being verbally engaged. But Trina must wait till she graduated, he said, before they could marry. Now the holidays were upon the school, and it gave way for much more time for Woodrow and Trina to be together. So Christmas break was there. Now Trina and Woodrow could be together, but never without Antonio accompanying them as a chaperone. Trina was warmed and happy to the very heart. Woodrow, herself, and her papa, she had everything. A token of Woodrow's promised love made Trina the proud owner of a dark fur jacket trimmed with wide collar and cuffs of the same fur. Added to Woodrow's shopping spree for his sweetheart was her choice of any latest styled dress hat that she desired. Trina's choice was the prevailing fashionable trend of the days, the whimsical, the cheerful, the feminine. And on the day of that photo shot, Trina wore the dark pillbox hat that dropped to the side and held a long single quill through the top. Trina was dressed fit to kill, as Woodrow called it. Well, that's enough for today, and we'll pick our story up tomorrow. It continues to be very exciting and unfolds in a story wonderfully true. Bye for now.
When we talk about family matters, it's because family matters. Rita will be back again tomorrow, and you are invited to join her for more of Family Matters.